The Cleveland Cavaliers are heading into the 2023-24 offseason with very little to work with in terms of cap space. Armed with really only the $12.2 million full mid-level exception, they must scour the free agent market in search of potential fixes to the holes that became even more glaring in their 4-5 seed series matchup with the New York Knicks. One of those holes is the need for consistent point guard play off the bench. Caris LeVert basically operated in that role for many parts of the season and did so once more once the 2022-23 playoffs came around due to Ricky Rubio looking nearly unplayable. Now obviously, Rubio didn't exactly come into the season ready to go. He didn't make a return to the lineup until January 12th, missing the first 42 games of the year. This could be a huge reason why he never truly regained his 2021-22 form. Rubio will be heading into year 2 of his 3-year pact signed last offseason, and there is still a possibility that with the full offseason of work, he could start to look like the Rubio of old. However, if the Cavs don't want to totally rely upon him to do so, they could take a look at these 4 point guards that are due to hit the free agent market this offseason. Number 1, Patrick Beverley. Now we're talking about the mid-level exception here, and that likely means moves on the margin and low-risk, high-reward signings. Patrick Beverley, in my opinion, would be considered the former rather than the latter. At 34 years old, he is clearly closer to the end than the beginning in a career that didn't start until he was already 24 years old. He is not what anyone would consider a marksman from range, but he did average at least 38% in 6 straight seasons from 2015-16 to 2020-21. Beverley is not the same caliber of playmaker as Rubio, but he will be dependable enough to play alongside one of Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell in stretches to give them some off-ball opportunities. Most recently, he played with the Chicago Bulls, where he helped play a role in propelling them towards the play-in game. The Bulls went 14-9 down the stretch after acquiring him, and prior to the NBA trade deadline, the Bulls were 3 games under 500 at 26-29. But let's be real, bringing on Patrick Beverley accomplishes 2 things in particular. First, it would give the Cavs a former 3-time all-defensive teamer at the guard position who could handle the tougher defensive assignments at times. I can already imagine a lineup chock full of defense with Beverley, Donovan Mitchell, Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen. He finished the season ranked 12th in defensive blocks plus minus. The second and maybe most important thing this type of signing would do is give Cleveland an edge that they quite honestly are missing. Do they have tough, hard-nosed defenders on the roster? Absolutely. They lack a certain grittiness to them though, which was on full display during their matchup with the Knicks. They need a player who is not only capable of bringing that type of mentality, but one who can actually still contribute on court as well. Beverley would scratch that itch. Number 2 would be Dennis Smith Jr. While Patrick Beverley would be considered a move on the margins to me, I'd consider Dennis Smith Jr. a low-risk, high-reward addition. After years of bouncing around the league, Smith Jr. is just 25 years old and would still fit the established timeline. Admittedly, he is not the most efficient player, but he still offers high upside as a playmaking volume scorer off the bench. A high flyer who can get his own shot would be a nice addition to a bench that has often struggled to get consistent play out of the backup point guard position. Smith's ability to play make would fit in nicely next to Caris LeVert, who showed just how valuable he can be as a catch and shoot option. His 4.8 assists per game would have ranked second on the Cavs to only Darius Garland, with his 20.3% usage rate literally ranking right behind Ricky Rubio. Although he isn't a true threat from distance, he does find other ways to score. He attacks the rim at a pretty high rate. 171 of his 452 total field goal attempts this season came from within the restricted area, where he made 63.2% of them. The biggest thing to keep in mind when talking about his overall efficiency is that his field goal percentage on the season is hurt because of how poor he was as a perimeter shooter. The thing is, 6.3 of his 8.4 shot attempts came from 2-point range. He managed to complete a pretty efficient 47.5% of those. Durability will always be a bit of a concern, as Smith Jr. has never suited up for more than 69 games in any season since entering the league back during the 2017-18 campaign. But we're talking about a low-risk signing here though, so of course it would come with some asterisks. Number 3 is Jevon Carter. This one might be a bit of wishful thinking, because Milwaukee isn't likely to just let him walk out the door without doing everything in their power to retain him. Jevon Carter has consistently worked to improve his shot and playmaking capabilities, which has started to pay off. Carter was given an expanded role this season due to numerous injuries within the Bucks rotation, and rewarded the Bucks by making the most of his shot attempts and harassing opposing guards on the defensive end. He finished the 2022-23 regular season ranked 12th in the NBA in 3-point percentage. His 42.1% from distance would have ranked number 1 among Cavaliers this season among qualifying players. The best part? 2.4 of his 4.2 triples attempted were of the catch and shoot variety. He knocked down 43.9% of these looks. The guy is a quality shooter when given the opportunities, and for a Cleveland team devoid of many true threats out on the perimeter, Jevon Carter could step right in and space the floor for the Cavs. The real question is just how much is Carter going to cost? He signed a 2-year, $4.3 million contract with the Bucks last offseason, with the second year being a player option. He's in a pretty choice position right now with the Milwaukee Bucks, who should be perennial title contenders with Giannis in his prime. That could prove too much to pass up for him, but one couldn't blame him for wanting to test free agency in an effort to secure the bag. Number 4, Raul Neto. The Cavs could also opt to bring back Raul Neto as a break in case of emergency fourth guard or to compete for the backup spot outright. Neto was effective in the small amount of time that he actually saw the court. He only suited up for 10.5 minutes per game across 48 appearances. But in his lone start, a February 8th bout with the Detroit Pistons, Neto scored 14 points on an efficient 5-11 from the field, dished out 8 assists, and stole the ball 4 times. He could contribute when given the opportunity to, especially as a facilitator. Neto played 15 or more minutes in just 10 games this season, but in those 10 games, he handed out 4 or more assists 7 times. He is also quite pesky on the defensive end, despite being on the smaller side at 6'1". Due to the fact that he was a reserve, he didn't often get matched up with the NBA's elite at the position, but one performance in particular stands out, and that was his work against New York Knicks star Jalen Brunson. When drawing the defensive assignment in the Cavs' final regular season game against New York, Brunson was held to 0 of 5 when Neto was his primary defender. He isn't the quickest or tallest guy out there, but he gives his all on both ends. Bringing him back as a veteran presence who can still contribute on the court is something that needs to be considered.